And warm welcome. It's a very interesting and demanding times for board members, which is a good thing, because it actually means that our board mandates are really interesting. So warm welcome, everybody. We are just about to start. And I think we have a lot of good, interesting things to share with you today. So today's topic is foresight, geopolitics, and sustainability in the boardroom. My name is Liselott Engstam. I'm the chair for Boards Impact Forum. I'm also a NED for listed and private companies. And today we will have some really interesting presentations. We have some fantastic, very experienced board members joining us. And if we go to the next chart, Fernanda. The agenda is that we will do a short framing, then we have the opportunity to listen to Jakob Stengel on the geopolitics and strategic dependencies. After that, we will listen to Fernanda Tor on scenarios for boards, the strategic foresight for decision making. And after that, we will have a panel with the two additional board members, Jan and Silvia. I will introduce everybody in due time. After that, it's your turn. We will have a little poll, and then we will organize ourselves into breakout rooms and have a discussion about the topic. And coming back from that, we will also have panel reflections following that. And then we will let you know what happens next. Amanda. So we are asking you to mute yourself initially. And the chat box is open and you can add your comments. For instance, you can add where you're calling in from and any boards that you work on. And the first part of this webinar is being recorded. And do avoid marketing in the chat. This is a sharing oriented webinar between us, and any technical issues you can mail them over to this mail address. So we go into a bit of the background for this. Fernanda.
Super. Thank you so much, Liselott. So I would like to give a bit of a background of why we're here today, because this webinar does not happen in isolation. So we just started a very exciting project called European Boards Growth and Resilience Roadmap. So what this entails, we have started from the premise that Europe's competitiveness will be determined to a great extent on how well boards govern the intersection of both risk and opportunity with climate, with geopolitics, the technological transformation. So if we accept that boards have a very important role in this journey, then how can we translate the existing principles from the Chapter Zero Alliance developed together with the World Economic Forum that were made to guide climate and nature in the boardroom? How can we translate them into some kind of roadmap where we are both identifying what boards need to do, but also what needs to be in place so that boards can do their work? So we're really trying to understand what's this intersection between the principles that are the guiding principles for our organization and everything that is happening out there in the world. So just to give you a bit of an overview of this process, we are right there on the little first start of that one, because this is the first webinar out of 4 out of this initial process, which is about having these webinars together with a survey, we're just trying to understand and build a common understanding about what's happening in Europe, surface different challenges, tensions, trade-offs, etc. Then we're going to have an event in Amsterdam. So I would like everyone to start penciling down. It will be in October this year, and probably on the 7th of October. We will come back with more details. But then we really meet, we come together, and we start working on this roadmap, which then we are going to workshop and test and go through together with all the European chapters from the Chapter Zero Alliance. And then we are going to propose this roadmap. So this is the first event, and we would really like to invite you to join us throughout the entire process. Today, we are focusing on the strategy principle. So the challenges, for those of you who have followed our work for some time, the challenges were just updated in the beginning of this year. So this looks a bit maybe different from how we have been talking about them previously, but the content is, of course, very, very similar. So when we are talking about strategy, we're really trying to understand how the board oversees the systemic integration of the material risks and opportunities into the organizational strategy, policy development, etc. So it's very much about including climate and nature-related considerations into that long-term strategy to bring the long-term value creation and the corporate renewal needed for the organization. This is a bit the background that I wanted to give. Liselott, do you want to introduce Jakob?
Thank you. Yes. So we're delighted to get into our first speaker, which is Jakob Stengel. And Jakob is the chair of the Danish Professional Directors Association. And he's also a lot of board experience. He's also an executive search partner of one of the largest search networks. And in very many different ways, he has done a lot of insights, both in his own capacity and recruiting for boards. And running these board networks as well. And we're also delighted to have Jakob as a board member of Board's Impact Forum. And we're delighted to have Jakob share a bit from his survey, one of the largest surveys with board directors in the world, and also a bit around geopolitics, which is very engaged with and actually runs journeys and trips with that you can all join. Warm welcome, Jakob. Over to you.
Thank you so much, Liselott, and thank you so much, Fernanda, for the kind introduction and also for the invitation. I'm going to start out by showing a few data points from our most recent global survey. It's so recent that it's actually not been officially published. The data were all gathered in January and February this year. So you should bear that in mind. But it's actually, as you mentioned, Liselott, it's actually the world's largest survey among board directors. This year we had 3,416 respondents from 84 countries. Please, if you would share the next slide, Fernanda. This is just, a very brief slide to show you what BlackRock, the world's largest institutional investor, how they track and how they publish their geopolitical risk indicator. And you can see, there are some very significant peaks there, with a pandemic in 2020, a Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. In 24, we saw again a spike after the October 7 attack on Israel. We saw another spike after the U.S. presidential election. And now, obviously, again with the American and Israeli attack on Iran. So what does that mean? Well, as the points will tell you, we see a fragmentation geopolitically, and we see disruption coming from technological advancements such as AI. We see very, very distressed energy supplies and supply chains at and large. That challenges our capital discipline, both with executive management, but also obviously with the boards. It also means that we are foreseeing more talent shortages. And all meanwhile, we have to deal with the societal expectations that comes with stakeholder engagements and so on. So what does that really mean? I mean, we are no longer governing a stable system. We have to govern while the system itself is fragmenting. Will you share the next slide, please, Fernanda? So just two of the graphs from our survey. One question goes to which 5 megatrends, it's on your left-hand side, which 5 megatrends do you expect to have the most significant impact on society and the economy in your country in the coming 3 years? And the top 2 are AI and war and other geopolitical instabilities, right? Followed by sanctions and trade barriers, growing nationalism on the expense of globalization, and so on and so forth. Everything almost, except for the AI part, comes down to geopolitics and how they are playing out. Interestingly enough, we saw none of these before 2020. None of these subjects were at all on the radar for global boards. And I can tell you that because we have been running this survey for the past 14 years. On your right-hand side, you'll see our graph where the question goes to which competencies would you say are present on your board to a sufficient extent considering the board strategy and financial situation right now. And disturbingly enough is that all the elements that are mirrored in the global megatrends, the top scorers there are the bottom scorers on the competency side, right? So where boards feel the least comfortable is within AI, followed by innovation R&D, followed by cyber risk, followed by public affairs, followed by supply chain management and geopolitics and so on. What does that mean? Well, we see the 4 recurring gaps. And when I say recurring, it's because we see the same pattern every year, right? We see that a lot of the boards are aware of what's coming to hit them, but they are not ready for it in a competent sense. We see that the strategy can come out as relatively firm, but we don't see capability on the board mirrored in that. We see risk tools at a relatively high advancement level. But how does that mirror with the governance tools? And then we see the board comfort. The boards are very comfortable with themselves and their own performance, but we don't see it any kind of tendency in terms of board renewal, which is, maybe a problem considering the lack of competences within the fields that are arising the most. So they know what could hurt them, but they are not yet ready to govern it. So please, the next slide, Fernanda. So this is just a highlight of how supply chains usually play out. And what I want to highlight with that is that what we're seeing right now is yet another example on how interdependencies are truly rocking the world. I think that one of the first examples on how that played out was the oil crisis in the 70s. A small group of countries, being the OPEC countries, kind of put the entire world in distress because they turned the tap to the oil barrels off, leaving everyone in distress. We saw it again during the financial crisis, where all the interdependent banks, when one folded, another followed, and that just continued. And now we're increasingly seeing it, and that's obviously that's a side effect of all the benefits that we harvested from the globalization era, that we have also become much more dependent on one another. We are so dependent, all of us, on the rare earths coming out of China or through their ecosystem. We are obviously we're dependent on the semiconductors and the chips coming out of Taiwan and the US. We're also very dependent on these softwares, the systems or the applications coming out of the US. All of that means that in Europe, we have very little independency as of right now, but I think that a lot of boards are working on that. Right now, we face trade barriers, we face sanctions, we face supply chain fragmentation because of the two wars, and probably more going on, but especially in Ukraine and in the Middle East. We see industrial policies imposing on us, and we have ongoing wars, right? Also disrupting travel patterns, energy costs, and so on. However, very few boards have true geopolitical expertise. That's what I showed you in the previous slide, and adding to that, they have very little scenario planning capability. So please, Fernanda, if you'll take the next slide. From a Nordic perspective, I would say that the Nordic governance model proves to be strong but not immune. The strengths for the Nordic countries are that we work with high transparency levels. The ownership model at large is heavy influenced by long-term ownership or long-term owners. We have quite independent boards. And we carry stakeholder trust. However, we obviously, as many others, still share the same technological and geopolitical risks as everyone else in the world. Please, the next slide, Fernanda. But what have we been able to actually record that the very best performing boards do differently together? First of all, they treat the board composition as strategic infrastructure. What that means is that they map the competences on the board in what they have recognized to be their strategic challenges, considering the company's current situation financially and strategically. They govern AI at a board level. They don't just leave that to an IT department or whatever, or what could happen, at least with tech deployments a decade ago. They institutionalize what we're talking about today, geopolitical intelligence and scenario planning, in their board agendas, and they redesign their own board agendas around structural risks. And what I mean by that, you can look at structural, which is like 5 to 10 years of planning. You can look at systemic 1 to 3 years, and you can look at operational risks, which would normally fall within the 1 to 12 months bracket. And finally, they maintain strategic optionality. And the last point is probably one of the most important points when we talk about working with scenario planning, but because that is not just a risk mapping exercise. On the contrary, it's very much around also trying to uncover what opportunities actually lies within the next possible scenario steps that we could take. And a very, very good example of that was how the best performing companies during the COVID pandemic actually were able to turn a quite unforeseen and quite a severe situation into an ocean of opportunity. And the DIY markets and furnitures and hard goods and so on, they all made a fortune, right? Because people didn't just go out and spend their money on experiences, but in what could create their houses, homes, and nests. One example on strategic optionality, bear that in mind when you employ the ideas of working with scenario planning in a geopolitical context. And that, I believe, was probably the last slide for me. Thank you very much for your attention. I'm happy to take a question. Oh, okay. Sorry, we can go for that. That's on the European side. Thank you for bringing that up, Fernanda. What we wanted to highlight there was that with some of the actions taken and decisions made over the course of the past 2 years, we have seen a movement in Europe towards greater independency, but still not there. I mean, we are going in that direction, but we have not reached our goal. But we are coming together. There's more unity, except for maybe 2 European countries, on security, defense, and economical sovereignty. We also see small reasons for democratic optimism. We see more trading flexibility, and that's been exemplified by the major trade deals that's been made lately with India, Mercosur, Australia, and Canada. And then we actually have quite a stable economy. We don't have any kind of high growth economy. So in that sense, we are lagging behind the rest of the world, but we're actually quite stable. And these days, I mean, stability is in favor of high risk and reward. I would claim.
Thank you so much, Jakob. Since we have 2 minutes left, I know you organize geopolitical travels. Could you just share with us what it means and what is coming up soon?
Absolutely, and thank you for the question, Liselott. We believe, as advisors, that how the best way for boards to actually get a real grasp on what is going on in a geopolitical distressed world is not to get their news from the news clippings on social media or filtered through the relatively little internationally focused news media in the Nordics, and even the real advanced ones that go to The Economist for their ideas and inspiration and knowledge, I would say are lacking behind. What we are doing is trying to give our delegations a first-hand experience on what's going on in geopolitical hotspots around the world. We have last year taken them to Beijing and Shanghai. That was one trip. Another trip was going to Kiev in Ukraine. A third trip for Brussels and Luxembourg to focus on the EU and NATO institutions. This year, and that's actually next week, we're going to Greenland, which has all of a sudden become a very hot topic because of an American president. And later on this year, we will take a delegation to Washington, D.C. and New York City right in the week of the midterm elections to kind of understand what will the result of the midterm elections truly mean. If you cannot go on those trips, I would advise you to seek some very, very high level of inspirational sources. And just to give you a few ideas on that, I would go to the English Chatham House that publishes some very, very diligent reports. If you're looking for a more continental perspective, I would go to the Bruegel think tank or the World Economic Forum, which between them have some very, very strong geopolitical vice versa economic reports. There is the Eurasia Group, which is American but had a very strong European hub. And then obviously to all your local ministries of foreign affairs, which usually have quite a good grasp. I would say in the Nordic region, we are particularly good in also mapping and publishing analysis on the defense and security sides, but I would say independently between the countries, there are a few very, very good ones, actually both in Norway, Sweden, Finland, and in Denmark.
Thank you so much, Jakob, and we will pick your brain further and actually ask you to add that to the blog post coming so people can see and take their choice. Thank you so much. It's certainly a lot going on. We will take our next step and we will ask Fernanda, who is the operations director of Boards Impact Forum, but she's also an innovation strategist and academic researcher affiliated to several of the schools in Nordic, and she's also the co-author of the AI Leadership for Boards. She is really an expert and she teaches around foresight and scenarios. So we'd asked her to take a brief on that and let us know what it means for boards. Over to you, Fernanda.
Super. Thank you so much, Liselott. It's really great to be here and also especially talking about such dear topic to me. So I want to start by addressing a research that we actually did together. So Liselott, the chair here at Boards Impact Forum, together with Henrik Forselius, that's also a colleague that is collaborating now with us at Boards Impact Forum, myself and Professor Ludo van der Leyen from INSEAD. In 2024, we published a paper called Dynamic Board Capabilities. We published it in this Journal of Risk Management in Financial Institutions. And this research, we were looking at dynamic capabilities for boards. So dynamic capabilities are these capabilities in an organization that are really about this kind of intangible value creation. And our initial idea was, okay, we have an environment that is continuously changing. So what organizations need to do in order to adapt their resources, capabilities, etc., and what boards need to do in order to be able to mirror that transformation. So we came up with these three capabilities: sensing, pivoting, and aligning. And for those of you who have followed a bit our work here at Boards Impact Forum, we keep coming back to these three capabilities: sensing, pivoting, and aligning. Sensing, pivoting, and aligning. So today we're really going to kind of deep dive here within the sensing capability, but I want to just give you a bit of an introduction to all three. So sensing, it's really about enhancing the board's insights into the environment, into what's happening. so that it's possible to introduce this to the strategic decision-making process. Pivoting is about doing those decisions, implementing, leading this renewal in terms of innovation, strategy, organizing it in a portfolio, etc. And then we have aligning. It's when we really put the right resource allocation in order to follow up on this pivoting or following up on this decision. So today we're going to dive into sensing, as I said. So one main aspect that we keep talking about is the board shouldn't be just signing off on sensing capabilities. They should have the sensing capabilities themselves. So boards need to be independent from management when it comes to understanding the context that we're in, the environment, etc. So very much following up on, for example, the example from Jakob, right? Don't just read about it in the news, go there yourself. So very much this proactive attitude in terms of sensing. I wanted to just give a small kind of overview about why this is important and how to do it. So what you're seeing here is the futures cone or the voroscope, and the whole idea is that we are here, we are now, we are on that initial moment, and what we need to do is to understand, first of all, that the future is multiple. Future is multiple, so there isn't one future, there's different ones. Let's imagine that we are in a dark room and we are with a flashlight in our hand and we are kind of projecting that flashlight into a wall. And there is that initial part that there's a lot of light. That's the future that we are kind of expecting to see, so probable. But around there's also other futures that are a bit maybe with not so much light, a bit darker. So things that are plausible and a bit more even to the edges. There's things that are possible or even preposterous. Now, one of the challenges that we see and that we face nowadays is that these edges, what's possible and what even is preposterous, is actually becoming the futures. We're seeing that what used to be the probable, that we know it's likely to happen, it's not really unfolding in that way. So in order for us to be able to navigate this future cone of possibilities, there are different tools that boards can have. Of course, the most common, well-known is scenarios, and I wanted to just address that a little bit. But I also wanted to give you some examples of how boards can do this themselves, how boards can try to understand different signals. So looking into scenario thinking, scenarios are coming mostly within a board context, accepted within financial institutions, but not only. So this is an example from Bayer, and this is following the TCFD, so within the financial disclosures, but it's a tool that doesn't only follow financial institutions. This tool has been evolving in the last years, but it has been very common within financial institutions. This is an example coming from Nordea, for example. Now, one of the challenges we have is that sometimes we follow, or rather we become trapped in this understanding what we are talking about when we're talking about scenarios. So one thing is a forecast, that we understand what's probable. We for example, sales forecast, or we have a certain certainty about what's coming our way. But then there's the other way around, the vision, where we would like to take this organization. And scenarios are somewhere there in the middle. It's within possible, within plausible, but it's uncertainty based. We do not create scenarios when we really understand how things are going to develop. The idea of scenarios is that we are exploring uncertainties when we really don't understand where things are going, but it's based on relations. So if this happens, then that might happen also. This creates this scenario, and so on and so forth. So very much used to illustrate and explore risks. It can be qualitative or quantitative, and it's based on decision making, and unfortunately is still nowadays quite rarely used. It's not used as often as we think should be, and also following up on the points that Jakob did. And one important aspect of scenarios is to, and like I said before, especially when it comes to this sensing capabilities at board level, is really to be able to do it ourselves. So there's something about just getting information that is already digested that gets lost within the richness of the possibilities. If the sensing capabilities lives in the board, and if the board has these practices of doing this continuously, then we think that it's a really good start then to go into that pivoting, aligning, etc. And I wanted to take this opportunity to just show you a little bit what's on my mind. So this is a very kind of narrow, specific, let's take a peek into Fernanda's brain and the kind of things that I have been looking into within the last week that I have been presenting this, that I've been preparing this presentation. So as you know, I'm very interested in tech, and I have been really interested in understanding what's the situation now that we see such a big whiplash when it comes to privacy. I mean, we have persons like Prince Harry welcoming lawsuits against tech firms. I mean, when you have Prince Harry saying something, then it's pretty mainstream. Then you know that it's kind of what everyone agrees on, right? And here in Europe, we have also seen things like, for example, in France, there has been raids into X's head offices and investigations into criminal activity, especially connected to pedophilia. So there's a widespread sense that this is what people want, that the people want to have accountability when it comes to privacy. At the same time, EU is developing a digital omnibus that is really looking into simplifying GDPR. Some interest groups have really been connecting it to very powerful lobbying from big US tech. Let's see where this will land. But already this year, we see that the European Data Protection Board has made very clear that they are going to be very forceful when checking GDPR. So we are in a moment that it seems to us in boards that legislation is going to become weaker, but regulators are still pushing very hard for record fines. So just a bit of a tension here between kind of what the public wants, the general sentiment, but also where we are going in terms of legal. Then I wanted to just point out something that I find very interesting when it comes to the digital dependency. And this was also mentioned by Jakob. So right now, Europe relies on non-EU countries for over 80% of their digital products. Just in cloud infrastructure, Amazon, Microsoft, Google command around 70% of the European markets. And local providers such as SAP, Deutsche Telekom, OVH Cloud, they have collectively around 15%. And this is becoming a problem because there's the fear of this skill switch in terms of a geopolitical reality. What happens if an organization just decides to stop working with a specific government, etc.? So we've seen, so just very, very recently, there was a German state that decided to disinstall Microsoft, to stop using Microsoft products. We've seen this last year in Denmark. in Copenhagen and Aarhus, also kind of leaving Microsoft behind within public institutions. So it's a very, very interesting trend. At the same time, there was just very recently an European memorandum, a resolution that was voted in the European Parliament, which is this European technological sovereignty and digital infrastructure. So we can really expect that this sovereignty infrastructure is going to be pulled forward. And this is also very much connected to the Cloud Act in the US that has a very clear conflict with GDPR. With the Cloud Act in the US, it allows US firms to just request back information from businesses across the world. So Europe is really trying to work with this. A very good example is Wero, that is going to become a pan-European payment platform. I think that this signal is particularly relevant when it comes to Europe. So we've seen now January, February, around 1 to 2 trillion in terms of market cap for software valuations that has been lost, and this has to do with AI. The per seat pricing model from SaaS, it's called now the SaaS apocalypse. The pricing model doesn't really work with agents. It's not, you don't have this per seat anymore. And this has created a rotation from these very kind of growth-driven stocks to value stocks. And we see here in the middle how this actually has been very good for Europe, because it has been that investors seeking shelter from AI and really investing in halo assets. Halo assets are heavy assets, low obsolescence, so very much infrastructure, to some extent even luxury products. So very much benefiting Europe, benefiting Japan, for example. And I also wanted to bring up a last signal that I think it's really interesting. What we see is, of course, the tremendous strain that AI provokes on the environment, on climate. We see, for example, Microsoft had a very ambitious plan of reducing and being carbon negative by 2030, and that is just impossible at the moment. We see there below that GIF there is from Colossus, Elon Musk's. I think that this one is from the one in Mississippi. There's also another one in Memphis, the data center, and they are just burning methane 24/7 in order to have energy to drive that data center. So there's a huge strain in the environment. At the same time, in order to deal with the heavy costs of all this energy that is needed in order to drive AI, we see a shift from LLMs, large language models, into SLMs, small language models, or even tiny language models that are much narrower, much smaller, work very well, specifically in a business context when it's a very narrow task. Another
Fernanda, I
trend.
think we'll close down and take the rest in the comments and in the panel.
Perfect.
Yeah.
Very good. Very good. It was actually also my last slide. Let me just say that we are now driving a project when it comes to scenario thinking. And we would like to find board directors that have experience with scenarios, that have good practices to share. Please come in contact with us, because we are going to create this training program around scenarios. So please reach out.
Thank you. Thanks so much, Fernanda. And now if we just take up the next slide of the rest of the panel. So we will welcome Silvia Stefini, who is a very experienced board director, and she also works with the Climate Governance Initiative in Italy. And she works both in financial services, in energy, actually in a lot of the industries that is slightly more used to running with scenarios. And then we're delighted to also have Jan, who has a huge insight into the supply chain and impacts on supply chains from all of these changing situations. So I think if we take down the presentation, Fernanda, we can get the people into. Yeah, thank you so much. So I think I'll start with you, Silvia. You now heard an outline on the challenges of the geopolitics and the resilience, and also some more on the importance of scenarios. Can you share with us something on how you look at that with scenarios and how you work with that on your boards?
Sure. Yes. First of all, I'm happy to be here, and I think the introduction was really great to set the tone for the discussion. In my experience with different boards, both in energy, in aerospace and defense, and in banking, I have seen the interaction of different risks, and now the geopolitical and the scenario that we are facing is really booming up and creating a sort of emergency and crisis management mood within the board itself. And what I perceive is that we tend to look at this type of crisis and address them when they come up in a quite reactive way. And we haven't enough worked at scenarios on the upfront to really make us more resilient as in the board discussions. However, this is coming up much more and more. If I see the way this type of crisis were looked at a few years back, it was much more looked at one by one. Now, right now, we see the speed of how this risk interface one with another. So the interconnection is now much faster, and this really obliged boards to think more strategically about the scenario planning. The way I've seen it work in a good way is in particularly during the strategic planning. When there are sessions where the board discusses strategic planning, I see now much more engaged discussions, and the way this is typically done in a more effective way is really when the boards are having special sessions in discussing strategic plan, and leaving the room for enough deepening and enough discussions about alternative assumptions and what could happen. So it's not entirely embedded in the board dynamic itself, but is typically done outside of the board in order to make the board member really able to interact and giving all the possible contribution. I would say that board composition play a critical role here because having the right tools to solicit discussion is extremely important, but also having the people in the room prepare for this discussion. So having seen multiple crises, having really lived through different business models, and being able to understand the business model in pretty much details. So I would say that the most effective way for board to address the type of situation that we have right now is really go deeper in understanding the business model, understand the drivers, and being able to challenge the different assumptions, and so getting a broader discussion.
Thank you so much, Silvia. I think we can all, who were at boards already after COVID, we all can recognize these more nervous board directors that actually creates more issues in the boardroom than actually helps the board and the company moving forward. Jan, you were in the midst of that with the COVID, etc. So can you share a bit with us on where do you see the biggest kind of challenge on the board level strategy and then actually creating resilience, i.e. the things that scenarios were supposed to be sharing with us?
Yeah, thank you, Lieselot. I think that we are seeing this today, all every day in the news. I mean, every day in the news, we hear about Americans and Israelis using, for example, sophisticated AI models to define their targets. And I read a very interesting analysis even yesterday about the fact that those AI models require chips made out of Taiwan using helium. And helium is used to cool down the machines. And helium comes from Qatar. And at the moment, we have hundreds of containers stuck because of the Strait of Hormuz being closed. And they have about 35 to 48 days worth of life before they evaporate. So it's a kind of example where we've defined a war that now is eating its own tail, not to say eating its brain, right? So this is just like we do things and we do not take care about A, consequences, B, what is the supply chain that lies behind and the interconnections that we have. So that leads me to what do we do at the board level? And we do ask questions, right? So
that's our secret weapon.
Question should we ask ourselves? My first question would be, when did we exercise our plan B or our business continuity plan? Because one thing I've learned in my very early days serving on a French nuclear submarine was that we would exercise things and backups every week. And we would consider that things that haven't been exercised do not exist or don't work. So we would have to submit proof that we had exercised things. And I think that it's a pretty good practice, even at board level, to ask for such things. So when did you do that? Because I had several exchanges ever since the war started, and it seems that the consequences are now playing the same way the COVID happened. Is that today this is more happening in Asia. Asia is very much disturbed and affected by the crisis, and I think it's moving now westwards progressively, and we're going to be hit in a very hard way. Now, what people are exchanging is that, yeah, of course, board is asking for, didn't we learn from that? So that's another question. What did we learn from this crisis? And people are now stuck like deers in the headlights, right? Yes, we learned, but now what do we do? And we learned that we should have a plan B, but now everybody had the same plan B. Think about these things, about large company like CMA, CGM, building new routes to evacuate goods from the Oman Sea, and they move now by trucks to Jeddah or to Aqaba or to Mersin in Turkey. And the problem is that what is the capacity of these things?
Yeah.
And in fact, everybody discovers that they had the same plan B. So when we look at plan B or business continuity plan, did we exercise that with our ecosystem? People are saying the same for cybersecurity, for example. If you're hit by a virus or being hacked or whatever, you should simulate that with your ecosystem. So with your business partners, with your suppliers, and the way they would react. So let's face it, business continuity plan is an ecosystem sport. This is not an individual sport.
Yeah.
And we should consider teams as being quite large.
Right.
So yes, another question is, with whom did we exercise that? And how do we exercise these things? So, and of course, now I'm really dwelling on risks, but supply chain should be also considered as opportunities to move faster than others. So then again, how are we using our supply chains to be better off than competition, which is another question.
Right. Thank you so much for sharing that. I think our secret weapon is truly important, and sometimes we also do need to give some guidance if we have more competence as a group together. I'll just go back to one of the challenges that I can find also on my own boards, and that is that a lot of the analysis around the risks are done within the risk and audit committee. So Silvia, how do we actually get the entire board to be engaged? And how do we make sure that we don't just look at the risks, but also look at the opportunities?
I think that the risk and audit committee plays a key role in discussing and identifying the right taxonomy of risk. But the way this should be done in engaging the entire board is really starting from the beginning, from what are the risks we are looking at. So having a more top-down approach versus the bottom-up. I think we are all grown up with the typical enterprise management frameworks where you gather a lot of the risk bottom up. But by the time they arrive to the board for discussion, they are already late. No, we need more speed in this discussion to happen. So a good way to do this is really starting from the board and from the C-level, from the people who really are the risk owner, the one who manage the risk, and identifying those risks from the top and bring into a discussion where you can also look at the future and bring in the innovation in it. Thinking that the technology is an opportunity, is a way to address risks. So you can't have a discussion about top risks without embedding innovation in the way you shape the company and the risk assessment. So that, I believe, is a critical moment. If this discussion at a different level in the organization, but starting with the blessing from the board and the critical discussion about the board. If we think about the key risk we've been discussing, like the supply chain or the energy transition risks, they are all embedded in the way the business model is built. And some of these risks are been typically happening every time there is a geopolitical crisis, like the one we are facing now. We have seen supply chain recession. We have seen the energy risk, energy security becoming at the top of the situation. So the way to address this in a more systematic way is building the resilience from that point of view at the level of, say, strategic plan. And this happens when there is the right level of discussion from the top. It's really a matter of managing short-term and long-term. So when you are in the risk and audit committee, there's a lot of focus on understanding the risk as they are hitting us today. But bringing the ability to look at the long term at the same time. So you have to manage the execution of the current risk right now. You have to manage the crisis management at that particular point, but bring it in the context of the long term. And that's what a proper risk oversight from the board should do. If we think about, for example, the energy crisis that we are facing right now, clearly it's linked with a structural inability to address the energy transition in the systematic way. Today, the companies and the countries that are less impacted by the energy crisis and the geopolitical crisis are the ones that have addressed energy transition better upfront. No? So getting a structure in a way that you have a business model that is less dependent with the vulnerability. And this is building resilience. So I think it does start with the risk committee, but it has to come. The risk committee is kind of midway between the management team and the global board discussion, is where there is the time to go deeper and to bring the key issues to the discussion at the board level. But really bringing the short-term and long-term discussion at the same time without avoiding to address the right problems.
Thank you. Now we're launching a little poll so we get the insights from all of our participants with 3 questions. And the first one is on strategy and integration. So do our board, in this case, integrate the climate and nature into strategy and capital allocation? And the second one is on the scenario thinking. Is our board proactively actually engaging in scenarios? So not just stamping it, not just getting it up, but actually engaging in it. And the third one is on the dependencies and ecosystems. Are we proactively actually monitoring the key dependencies, which we obviously weren't when it came both to the COVID and the war? Have we gotten better, or are we actually still a bit challenged in identifying the dependencies and monitoring them? So please answer the poll, and after that we will go into breakout rooms. And I think we will end the poll now in 5 seconds. And here we have the poll. And let me know if you can see the results.
Yes.
So if we start with the integration of the climate and nature into the strategy, and if I ask maybe Jan to just comment on the first question, does this map to you? Are we getting better in integrating it?
This is quite interesting because there's a very small fully agree, and then it's pretty much the same on agree, neutral, and disagree. And I would say that yes, we tend to. I mean, it's normal that we have 1/3 that's saying agree, because I think there is a lot of conversation going on in boards around sustainability and of course geopolitics. I think that one is more flavor of the day than it was before, and sustainability is now coming to be more on a second priority in number of companies, especially those that are exposed to Northern America, because they have to let's say not really hide but play it not provocatively, so as to not be at risk, but yes, and neutral is neutral and disagree. If you look at the sum up of all this, that's 60%, which is quite a lot.
So we still have something to do. Now we're getting to the second question, which is around scenario thinking, if I look at that and ask Fernanda to comment on that, does this reflect what you've seen?
My comment is actually very similar to the one of Jan. I mean, the fully agree is very small. And my experience with boards is that the vast majority do work with scenario thinking, but it's what I mentioned in the beginning of my presentation, that they are not sensing themselves. They are rather working with scenarios that are presented from management, and then you kind of sign off, or even if you have a discussion around it. So I just wanted to point that up, that there's a difference between scenarios or having the sensing capabilities themselves as a board also.
Thank you. And Jakob, I'll ask you for the last one on the ecosystems and dependencies. Do you see that boards are getting better at looking at the strategic dependencies? And if so, how are they doing it?
I see that a lot of boards think that they are getting better, but when push comes to shove, they often find themselves caught between a rock and a hard place anyhow, right? Because they never really thought the whole scenario through, right? And quite often there are dependencies that they didn't map sufficiently because it was considered to be a very, very small part of the entire wheel. But if you take a very small part out of a wheel, nevertheless, it won't keep on going around. It is a very, very tricky exercise to carry out, and as Jan pointed out in his remarks, you need to have, if you want that to work sufficiently, you need to have a plan B or C or D or maybe all four for every part of your value and your supply chain. And most people don't think about it to that extent. They tend to only have plan Bs and not a plan C, and they only have a plan B for the very, very major parts of their supply chains. So no, I like that at least 46% agree, but I think that I'm not going to say that our audience are overestimating themselves, but I would say that in general, boards tend to overestimating how well they're doing within this area.
Right, and you might be right. We might have the better ones already understanding that this is a hot topic joining here. Now we're going to go into
right?
we're going to go into a discussion. Fernanda, can you just share the question? So what we want you to discuss is, where is our board falling short in foresight and long-term risk? And what is one change that we should prioritize to address this? So we're opening the rooms, and we will get you all back in about 12 minutes.
And yeah, I also have the pleasure to wrap up. I'm going to share the screen again, and I just wanted to give you a bit of an understanding of what's coming next. So for us here at the Boards Impact Forum, we have right now opening the next cohort of our AI program, and we have right now the 50% off early bird. So it's a really good opportunity to join us. So it's a hybrid model where we have webinars, and then we have an optional full day in Stockholm that is going to be on the 23rd of June. So that's going to be really nice, close to midsummer, a very different experience from our last cohort that was in cold January, full of ice. I'm going to put here the link in the chat for those of you who want to check it and have a bit more information. We have our next webinar coming up within this project, like I said before, within this growth and resilience in European boards, the roadmap. And this is going to be on the 23rd of April. We have some really amazing guest speakers joining us. So please register immediately, and then you'll just have direct access to the webinar. And please put down on your agendas. In October, we will go to Amsterdam, we'll meet face to face, we will have this discussion exactly about everything that we have been talking here and trying to nail down the roadmap, probably on the 7th of October, but we will come back with more information. And then finally, thank you so much to all the speakers, to Jakob, Silvia, Jan, great to have you here. But really a big thank you to all our partner chapters that made this session possible. We are co-organizing this with Chapter Zero Netherlands, but also with the Climate Governance Initiative in Greece, Chapter Zero Brussels, Chapter Zero France, and a very big support from other chapters. For example, Chapter Zero Italy and Chapter Zero Ireland, and many other colleagues here within the European ecosystem. So thank you so much.
And a warm thank you to you also, Fernanda, for sharing the insights around scenarios. Thank you to all our speakers. Thank you for everybody who joined. Thank you.